I'm a 34-year-old woman named Callie, and I married my husband Nolan, who's 36, just under a year ago. We'd been together for 3 years before tying the knot, long enough to know what we were getting into, or so I thought. Nolan is one of the calmest, most level-headed people I've ever met. He teaches high school history and has this steady, grounded presence that drew me to him from the start. I run a boutique flower shop downtown, and life with him always felt peaceful, easy in the best way. But that peace never extended to his mother. From the very beginning, Nolan's mother Diane kept me at arm's length. She wasn't rude in the traditional way, no yelling, no insults, but every interaction with her felt like walking barefoot over glass. Smiles that didn't reach her eyes, jokes that cut a little too deep, compliments with a faint sting behind them. If I wore a new dress, she'd say, "That color is brave on you." When I brought over handmade arrangements for her dinner parties, she'd smile and say, "Oh, that's different." Very modern. Still, I tried to keep things polite. She was Nolan's mother, and I wasn't looking to start unnecessary drama. Diane, on the other hand, seemed to specialize in it. The wedding should have been our clean slate, the fresh start. Nolan and I planned every detail together. It was intimate, simple, romantic, nothing over the top. We even included Diane in a few of the planning sessions, hoping she'd feel involved. At the reception, she gave a toast. And right there, in front of our closest friends and family, she spent 5 minutes reminiscing about Nolan's ex-girlfriend, talking about how warm she had been, how she used to bring her baked goods, how she just lit up a room. There was an audible silence when she wrapped it up with, "But I guess we all move on eventually, don't we?" Nolan pulled her aside that night and told her she crossed a line. The next day, she called me to apologize. She said she was sorry I felt hurt, but that it was just a sweet memory, and maybe I was a bit too sensitive about things. After the wedding, Nolan and I bought a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just something we could grow into. Diane stopped by the day we moved in, uninvited, and walked from room to room, making small noises of disapproval. She called the paint in the living room muddy, said our light fixtures were so urban, and paused for a long time in the kitchen before saying, "I guess if you like this kind of look." She told Nolan later that night that it felt like she was losing him, that she was being shut out, that he didn't need her anymore now that he had someone else taking care of things. The guilt trips became routine. Late-night calls, voice messages where she sniffled and sighed and said she just needed to hear his voice. And when Nolan didn't answer immediately, she'd follow up with passive-aggressive texts, like, "I guess I'm not important anymore." It didn't stop there. She started pressuring me to convert to her denomination, even though I'd made it clear I wasn't religious. At every family dinner, she'd find a way to bring it up, subtly at first, then more boldly. Once she even handed me a pamphlet with a handwritten note inside that said, "It would mean so much to the family." That same holiday season, I offered to host Christmas at our house. Diane threw a tantrum. Not the screaming kind, but a cold, rigid silence followed by a calm but icy monologue about how it's been a family tradition for decades to celebrate at her home. She claimed I was breaking the chain of family unity. She gave Nolan a $300 jacket that year. I got a clearance mug with "Live, Laugh, Love" in peeling gold letters. I recognized it from a local discount store because I'd seen a whole shelf of them on sale for $2. The same thing happened the year after. Same mug, same design, same wrapping paper. I started noticing something strange, too. She'd throw these big garden parties and charity fundraisers. Nolan would get a formal invitation, nice card, printed address label. I never got one. When I asked about it, she said, "Oh no, I definitely invited you. I must have sent it to the wrong address." It kept happening, every time. A woman named Teresa, who I knew through work and who happened to sit on the same charity board as Diane, hinted one day that Diane had been talking about me. She didn't want to say much, but she made it clear that Diane had been painting me as manipulative, saying I was pulling Nolan away from his roots. I didn't want to believe it. But then I found the texts. One afternoon, Nolan left his phone charging on the kitchen counter while he was outside. A message popped up from Diane. The preview alone made my stomach drop. I clicked into the thread and saw weeks of messages, subtle suggestions, not quite accusations. Comments like, "You seemed more yourself before and we need to talk about your options, maybe over dinner, just the two of us." And then the one that broke me, "I know you're trying to do the right thing. Just remember that you still have time to change your mind." I didn't even realize how fast things had been unraveling until I saw it all in one place. This wasn't just her being difficult. This was her trying to erase me completely. I had been playing polite while she had been playing chess. I hadn't planned what I did next, but I knew I wasn't going to keep letting her corner me in silence. If she wanted to play this game in public, I'd show her exactly what that looked like. And I had just the plan to do it. After I read the message about Nolan's options, I waited until we both had a full day off. I didn't want to bring it up during a rushed morning or at the end of a long workday. So I made breakfast, set it on the table, and handed him my phone with the thread open. I told him to scroll. I didn't speak. I didn't explain. I just watched. He read through the texts, pausing on a few, rereading others. When he finished, he put the phone down and just sat there. I asked him clearly, no games, if he agreed with anything she was implying, if he ever felt like he made a mistake marrying me, if he actually needed options. He shook his head and said no, but something about the way he said it made it feel like he was standing on a rope between two buildings. He said he didn't think Diane meant anything serious by it, that maybe she was just worried, that this was all just her way of coping with the change. I told him we needed space from her, not forever, not a complete cutoff, just a pause, a break. Some distance to reset things and set boundaries. I asked him to back me on this and make it clear that we were stepping back for a while. No more sudden drop-ins. No more late-night guilt calls. No more three-way dinners disguised as talks. He agreed, but not without hesitation. He kept repeating that he didn't want to cause more drama, that he wasn't sure if creating distance would actually help. He said it would break her heart. I told him that protecting our home wasn't drama. It was necessary. Eventually he agreed, but not like someone ready to stand tall. More like someone who didn't want to deal with the conversation anymore. That same night, I brought up couples therapy. If we were starting to bend under outside pressure, then we needed help finding solid ground again. He didn't love the idea at first, said we weren't at that point, but eventually said he'd try it once, just to see how it goes. It didn't take long before Diane figured out something had shifted. 2 days later, I got an email from her. A full essay. 3 long paragraphs accusing me of manipulating Nolan, turning him against his own mother, stealing his loyalty. She used words like brainwashing and wedge and poison. She said I was trying to erase her from her own son's life. That same weekend, I attended a community fundraiser for the local park renovation. It's something I volunteer for through my shop. Flowers for the booths, decorations, that sort of thing. I noticed a few women looking my way and whispering. Not the usual small-town gossip kind. It felt targeted. One of them, Lucinda, approached me later that evening while I was packing up vases. She said she didn't want to get involved, but thought I should know what was going on behind the scenes. That she'd been in a group chat with Diane and some of the charity board ladies and things had crossed a line. The next day, an anonymous email arrived. No subject line. Just attachments. Screenshots of group chat messages. Usernames I recognized, Diane's included. The messages were cruel. One called me that florist tramp. Another made fun of my shop's name, saying it sounded like a front for sad housewives with too much free time. One even accused me of trying to trap Nolan by pretending I wanted kids. But the worst came from Diane herself. She referred to me as barren, said I was a broken womb pretending to be a wife. She even joked about praying Nolan wakes up before he's stuck in this mistake forever. We hadn't told anyone we were trying to conceive. It was private. Even my best friend didn't know. But somehow, Diane knew, and she weaponized it. I saved every screenshot, every message. I started organizing them into a digital folder titled Just In Case. I didn't plan to use them yet, but I wanted to be ready. Later that week, I showed Nolan the messages. All of them. I didn't speak until he'd seen every single one. He didn't try to make excuses this time. He looked shaken, more than I'd ever seen him. He asked where I got them, who sent them, and then he left the house without saying much else. He went to speak to Diane in person. I don't know what I expected, but when he came back, it wasn't relief. He was quieter than ever. Said Diane broke down in tears, begged him not to leave her behind, told him I was turning him cold and making him someone she didn't recognize. He didn't argue with her. He didn't defend me. He just stood there and listened. After that, things changed between us. Nolan became distant. He stopped sitting next to me on the couch. Meals were silent. He started saying things like, I just want peace, and maybe we rushed into all this. He didn't say he regretted marrying me, but he didn't say he didn't. The one person who made sense through it all was Nolan's younger sister, Miri. She stopped by my shop a few days later and asked if I was okay. I told her the truth, not everything, but enough. She nodded and said she wasn't surprised. Diane had done similar things in the past. Tried to isolate Miri when she started dating her now husband. Played the victim. Bernie made everything about herself. That was the moment I stopped playing defense. I wasn't going to destroy Diane, not yet, but I was going to make sure she stopped playing the hero in a story where I was being painted as the villain. She wanted a battle. She was about to get one. After Miri confirmed that Diane had pulled this kind of behavior before, I stopped pretending things would fix themselves. I started treating it like what it really was, a coordinated smear campaign hidden behind fake smiles and charity dinners. If Diane wanted to play her game in public, I wasn't going to sit back anymore. After trying everything to keep the peace, something in me shifted. I realized staying silent wasn't strength, it was surrender. So I began organizing the names and connections Diane used to control her image, determined to expose the truth behind the smiles. I listed every charity board Diane was part of, every garden club she boasted about, every book club meeting she posted about online. I noted who she posed with in photos, who commented under her status updates, who shared her event flyers. Diane had built her reputation on social circles that thrived on image, gossip, and hierarchy, and I was going to use that structure against her. Lucinda reached out again, this time with a more direct offer. She had been friends with Diane for years, but said the woman had changed, or maybe just stopped pretending. Lucinda was done looking the other way. She offered to keep her ears open, especially during their regular board lunches and committee calls. She had been in the same group chats, had seen how Diane operated behind closed doors, and knew exactly which people were loyal versus which ones were already beginning to question things. Over the next few weeks, Lucinda kept forwarding me little updates, snippets of conversations, moments when someone on the committee raised an eyebrow at one of Diane's offhanded comments. She wasn't the only one either. Slowly, a few other women started sending private messages. Some were hesitant at first, but they all had stories. Times Diane had shut down new members, pushed through decisions without consent, taken credit for others' work. One woman shared how Diane had laughed at another member's divorce and spread false rumors about why it happened. I started with a soft move. I sent an anonymous email to the head of one of the larger charity boards Diane served on. It simply stated that a certain board member had been using donor contact lists to fuel personal gossip chains. I included no names, just the concern, phrased carefully, with one hint, a date when Diane had made a particularly off-color comment about someone's family finances that had only been shared during a closed donor meeting. Within a week, Diane was placed on temporary leave pending internal discussions. While the board didn't make a public announcement, quiet inquiries began circulating through the group. Asked. That's how these circles work. It wasn't about what happened, it was about how fast people whispered about it. Diane started getting disinvited from smaller events. Little things at first, a brunch here, a book club there. One woman told Lucinda she just didn't want drama around right now. Another mentioned she was taking a step back from committee work altogether. Within 10 days, Diane went from being the queen bee to sitting alone at a coffee shop pretending she was too busy to attend. The gala came at the peak of it all. A big charity ball held every spring, black tie, local press, the whole 9 yards. Nolan agreed to go with me, reluctantly. I picked a simple navy dress, kept my hair tied up, and made sure we arrived exactly on time. Diane was already there, laughing loudly near the bar with a group that looked less interested than they sounded. When she saw us, she waved like nothing had ever happened. The room didn't say anything, but I could feel it. Eyes followed her. Some smiled politely. Others just nodded and walked away. People spoke in hushed tones after she passed. Her presence didn't command attention anymore. It stirred discomfort. The confrontation happened in the restroom. She stepped in just as I was washing my hands, waited until the door closed and no one else was around. Then she looked in the mirror and muttered that I was turning her friends against her, that people were acting strange, that she knew what I was doing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just looked at her and said I didn't need to turn anyone against her. She was doing a great job all on her own. Then I left. The next move came without my help. Someone, no idea, who mailed printed screenshots of the group chat conversations to the charity's executive committee. Not just the board Diane was suspended from, but 2 others. The envelopes had no return address, but the materials were real. Diane's messages were there, in black and white, with her name and profile picture visible, including the one where she called me Baron, including the one where she prayed Nolan would come to his senses. I didn't leak those myself, but I didn't stop it either. By the end of the week, Diane's closest circle started to collapse. One woman she'd known for over a decade unfriended her and blocked her publicly on Facebook. Another backed out of co-hosting an event with her. Her name started disappearing from flyers and social media posts. Lucinda told me some members wanted her off the charity boards completely. Others were waiting to see how things unfold. Nolan didn't take it well. He asked if I was behind all of it. I told him I hadn't leaked the screenshots, which was true, but I also told him I hadn't protected Diane's lies either. I told him I wasn't going to stand there and let someone destroy my name, just because they didn't like losing control. He called it a takedown. I called it truth doing its job. He said it was getting out of hand. I told him he could choose to stay neutral if he wanted, but I wasn't going to play nice while someone tried to tear me apart with whispers. That night, for the first time in months, I got a message from Diane. It wasn't aggressive. Just one line, "Let's talk privately. No accusations. Please." I didn't reply. I blocked her after reading the message. No more second chances. No more fake reconciliations. She wanted to play in the mud. I just stopped letting her throw it without getting some on herself. I never replied to Diane's message. No response. No explanation. I just left her on read. After everything she had done, the gossip, the public humiliation, the group chats, there was nothing more to say. Lucinda told me later that Diane was furious. Not because of the fallout, but because I didn't play into her script. She expected me to crawl back, beg for peace, or at least acknowledge her. Instead, I let the silence answer for me. A few days later, I got a message from Eloise, one of Diane's longtime friends and part of her inner circle for years. Eloise apologized. She admitted she believed Diane's version of things at first. She said she had no idea how far the manipulation went, but after seeing the messages and hearing whispers from others, she realized how many people Diane had twisted around over the years. She said it wouldn't fix things, but she was sorry for ever looking down on me based on Diane's lies. Word about the screenshots kept spreading. Diane's Precious Garden Club, her pride and joy, held an emergency vote the following week. Diane had been a member for over 10 years. She ran the spring showcase every year, handled vendor relationships, judged competitions. When the vote was over, her name was off the committee. Her slot for the showcase was reassigned to a new member. Her pictures were quietly removed from their social media. No official announcement, just erased. It didn't stop there. Multiple charity organizations Diane worked with started restructuring or placing her on indefinite hold, citing internal unrest. One of Lucinda's friends told her straight up it was because of the chats. The boards didn't want to deal with the backlash. A few donors had already pulled support. One even threatened to pull out of an entire campaign if Diane stayed involved. That same week, Nolan came home looking like he hadn't slept. He said his mother called and cried for 45 minutes. She said people were cutting her off, that her name was being dragged through mud, that she was being erased from her own world. She told Nolan that no one was standing by her, that she gave everything to her causes, and now people were acting like she never mattered. Then Diane tried flipping the story. Lucinda sent me a screenshot of a new rumor Diane had started. That the screenshots were fake, that someone jealous of her success had digitally altered the messages to take her down. She didn't mention me by name, but the implication was obvious. According to her, someone wanted to tear down a strong woman who gave back to her community. I wasn't going to argue with her in public, but I wasn't going to let that lie grow either. I contacted a digital forensics expert I'd worked with once during a website breach at my flower shop. I sent him the screenshots and asked if he could verify their authenticity. He confirmed they were real, unaltered, and traced directly to the original devices. Metadata, timestamps, everything intact. I forwarded the report anonymously to the largest charity board Diane was still loosely connected to, the one that hadn't officially dropped her yet. 3 days later, they sent out an internal memo scheduling a formal review of her membership and conduct. The same board that used to name her as one of their legacy contributors had now paused all activity under her leadership. Then something unexpected happened. I got a message through LinkedIn from a woman I didn't recognize at first. She introduced herself as Diane's former assistant. She said she had worked under her for 2 years and kept a folder of emails, ones that showed Diane bullying other women, threatening volunteers over petty disagreements, and even bad-mouthing donors she didn't like. The assistant didn't want money. She just wanted someone to finally see who Diane really was. I told her to hold on to the emails for now. I wasn't sure how far this would go, but I didn't want her name dragged through the mess if she wasn't ready. She agreed and said she'd keep them safe. Meanwhile, Nolan started spiraling. His patience snapped. One night, he told me I was burning everything down just to win, so that I didn't care who got hurt as long as Diane lost. That this wasn't justice, it was obsession. We brought it up in our next therapy session. I explained everything, the emails, the gaslighting, the attempt to rewrite the story. I said I wasn't chasing revenge. I was defending myself. The therapist didn't take sides. She just looked at Nolan and told him that inaction can be a form of enabling. That silence in the face of abuse doesn't make you neutral, it makes you part of the system. Nolan stood up halfway through the session and walked out. 2 nights later, Miri sent me a voice memo. She said she remembered how Diane tried to ruin her relationship too. That Diane planted doubts about her now husband. That she made her question every decision, every boundary, until she finally moved out for 2 months just to breathe. Miri ended the message by saying, "You're not the first. And if you don't stand your ground, you won't be the last." Then came the final blow. I was checking our shared bank account to transfer funds for a supplier order. That's when I saw the transfer, $8,000 gone, labeled simply as personal. I asked Nolan about it. He said he sent it to Diane to help her get through a rough patch. He didn't ask. He didn't tell me. He just took it. That same evening, I withdrew my portion of the remaining money, closed the joint account, and opened a new one in my name only. I wasn't filing for divorce. Not yet. But I made one thing very clear. I told Nolan, "I'm not divorcing you, but I'm done protecting someone who threw me to the wolves while you watched." About 3 weeks after I closed the joint account and told Nolan I wasn't going to shield his mother anymore, I got an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Tamsin who ran a mid-sized podcast focused on women's wellness and real-life relationship struggles. She used to sit on a charity board that Diane had once led, and she had apparently been following the fallout through whispers in their social circles. She said she wanted to do an episode about toxic in-laws and public image control, how some people wear masks in public while destroying others behind the scenes. She invited me to share my story. Not my name, not Diane's name, just the facts. She offered a pseudonym and a voice filter. I agreed. The episode aired a week later under the title When the Villain Smiles and Curls. It didn't mention any names, but the details were enough for the right people to recognize who it was about. Screenshots, fake rumors, group chat leaks, social fallout, even the bit about someone calling another woman barren. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. The buzz started small, a few shares in local Facebook groups. Then someone from a nearby city posted it in a community subreddit. Someone from a nearby city posted about the podcast in a local community subreddit, and that's when it really started gaining traction. At first, it was just curiosity. Then people started listening closer. Connecting dots. At the country club Diane had fought her way into years ago, a few members requested a private meeting with the board. They wanted to discuss recent concerns regarding member conduct, according to Lucinda. The podcast episode had been brought up in side conversations. Nobody said Diane's name, but nobody had to. That same week, May, I got an email from the club's executive committee asking if I'd be willing to give a character reference for someone whose behavior had been indirectly called into question. I politely declined. I didn't need to testify. The story was already doing the work. 2 more women resigned from one of Diane's charity boards that week, citing ethical concerns in their statements. Lucinda forwarded me the emails. Both women had long ties with Diane but decided they didn't want to be associated with the current leadership. The board scrambled to reorganize its spring outreach project. That project had been Diane's flagship event. Diane's new strategy was more personal. She started calling up old friends one by one. People she hadn't spoken to in months or years were suddenly getting long, emotional voicemails. She told them she was being targeted by a bitter daughter-in-law who didn't understand old-school values. She painted herself as misunderstood, a victim of cancel culture. Some people bought it, most didn't. I didn't respond directly. I didn't leak anything else. I just posted a single Instagram story from my shop's account. A simple quote on a beige background. If telling the truth destroys you, it was never a lie that did it. Miri found something else too. She was going through old wedding footage, helping a friend edit a sizzle reel, when she came across raw clips from our ceremony. In one, as I read my vows, Diane could be seen in the second row rolling her eyes. When Nolan said his, she laughed. Quietly but clearly. I had never seen that angle before. The wedding photographer had cut it from the final edit. I asked Lucinda to help me organize everything we had. The chat logs, the screenshots, the resignation letters, the forensics report, and now the video footage. We uploaded it all into a private Google Drive. We didn't post it publicly. We just sent a link to every woman in Diane's church women's group. No note, no signature, just a burner email address in the subject line. You deserve to know who's representing you. A week later, the church announced a quiet restructuring of its hospitality committee. Diane's name was no longer listed, and her responsibilities were redistributed. There was no formal announcement, but a few members quietly confirmed the decision had come after several private discussions with church leaders. Nolan barely spoke that week. 10 words, maybe less. He sat on the couch in silence, watched TV without volume, stared at his phone when I entered the room. When I asked if he wanted to talk, he shook his head. He didn't fight. He didn't explain. He just faded into the background. I stopped waiting for him to pick a side, and then I started locking my home office door at night. I journaled. I cleaned out drawers. I played soft music and burned calming oils. I read books I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't about healing yet. It was about space. Real, uninterrupted space. Then something surprising happened. A customer came into the shop holding a small notebook and asked if I knew about the podcast. She said she listened to it and had cried in her car. She told me she'd dealt with similar family problems and wished there was a place where women could talk about it without being judged. That night, I wrote a quick idea on the back of a flower order receipt. A new monthly event at the boutique, open discussion circles for women navigating difficult in-law relationships. Not therapy, not advice, just space, coffee, tea, and people who understood. I called it Wildflowers After Winter. Not an official launch yet, but something was growing. Quietly, just like the truth had. After the podcast episode made its quiet rounds through town, a few more people started connecting the dots. Someone who used to chair a local fundraising committee emailed Tamsin, the host, asking if the story was based on someone around here. Tamsin didn't confirm anything. She didn't need to. The tone of her silence said everything. The next ripple came from a small local digital paper. Nothing big, just a community outlet that covers events, features, and the occasional opinion piece. One of their writers reached out asking for a comment regarding the podcast and the fallout around a certain high-profile social figure. I thanked them, declined the interview, and simply said that I stood by every word shared in the episode. That was it. No further explanation. A few days later, Nolan came home with a voicemail from his mother. He had put her on speaker while unlocking the front door without realizing the audio would play out loud. It was Diane, crying, rambling. Her voice cracked between gasps, asking Nolan to get your wife to stop this nightmare. She said people wouldn't look at her anymore. She said she couldn't even go grocery shopping without someone whispering behind her back. She called herself a ghost in her own life. I listened until it ended. Then I deleted it from his phone and said nothing except, let her lie in the bed she made. The next event hit her harder. The spring gala for the Children's Library was one of Diane's long-standing favorites. She'd attended for years, donated heavily, always brought her own photographer. That night, she showed up in full formal wear, dress, hair, makeup, everything, and walked up to the check-in desk with her usual smile. The coordinator glanced at the list and quietly explained that her name wasn't on it. Diane tried to argue, but security stepped in. In front of donors and guests, she was turned away. She left without a word. Around that time, Lucinda told me someone had quietly started circulating printed evidence that events messages and screenshots slipped discreetly into donation packets and handouts. It wasn't clear who was behind it, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Left on chairs, placed on coffee tables, tucked into donation packets, never mentioned out loud, but everyone saw them. Nolan started unraveling soon after. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to find him sitting on the floor of the hallway, breathing rapidly. He said he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't even look in the mirror. He finally broke down. Said he didn't understand how he let it get this far. That he kept hoping it would resolve itself without realizing he was just avoiding responsibility. He asked if I'd ever forgive him for standing by in silence. I told him forgiveness isn't a word, it's action. And I wasn't going to babysit adult emotions while cleaning up the mess they let happen. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It turned out to be Diane's older sister, someone I'd never met. In the message, she apologized, said she'd distanced herself from Diane years ago, said the family had always made excuses for her behavior. She didn't defend her. She didn't even try. She just said, she's always been like this. You just had the courage to show people. She followed up with an offer. She still had some of Diane's old letters Diane had written to a cousin back in the day, ranting about women she hated. One of them described me, calling me a placeholder and a stepping stone for Nolan's real life once he wakes up. I asked her to send scans. She did. I added them to the archive. I created a final document, a complete timeline of everything that had happened from the moment Diane tried to rewrite my wedding toast all the way to the voicemail she left Nolan begging for mercy. Emails, texts, images, witness statements. Every move, every lie, every attempt to isolate me. It read like a report, clean, chronological, undeniable. Before I closed the file, I sent it to a lawyer friend. She reviewed everything and confirmed it. No defamation, no false claims, no legal risks, just truth, backed with proof. That night, I sat in my office and wrote a single journal entry. Not long, just one line. I didn't destroy her. I just stopped holding her mask up. A few days later, Nolan mentioned that his cousin had called him to ask what was happening with Diane. Apparently, she hadn't been invited to 2 recent family gatherings. No explanation given, just radio silence. Nolan said he didn't know why, but he was starting to get a feeling it wasn't a coincidence. Then came the letter, handwritten, sealed, delivered in a plain envelope. Nolan didn't open it. He handed it to me directly. It was from Diane. The handwriting was unmistakable. Inside, a few short paragraphs. No insults, no excuses, just one request, a private meeting, just her and me. One last chance, no Nolan, no others, no audience. I read it once, folded it neatly. Then I put it in the back of my drawer next to the folder. I hadn't decided what to do with it yet, but one thing was already clear, she wanted the spotlight back. And she still hadn't realized that it wasn't the light that burned her. It was the truth. I waited 4 days before opening Diane's letter. I kept it in the drawer where I'd placed every file, screenshot, and witness statement. When I finally sat down to read it, I cleared the table, poured tea, and closed every window in the house. No distractions, just her words. It wasn't an apology. It was a plea. Diane wrote 5 pages in looping, dramatic handwriting. She called herself a victim of a moment of jealousy that spiraled. She described losing her friends, her church, her boards, and how the whispers were louder than truth. She said she was too old to rebuild, that she'd given too much to be erased, and asked me to calm things down so she could live the rest of her life in peace. She never used my name once. Not a single sentence took responsibility for what she'd done to me. The damage to my marriage, the public shaming, the months of manipulation, none of it was acknowledged. Only her consequences, her pain, her loss. Against what everyone told me, I agreed to meet her. I picked a quiet greenhouse cafe on the edge of town. I owned a small stake in it from helping with their plant design 2 years ago. I trusted the staff, and more importantly, I knew the angles. Before she arrived, I had 2 cameras discreetly rolling from behind shelves. I wasn't there to trap her. I was there to protect myself. Diane walked in dressed like someone in mourning. Black dress, dark shawl, no makeup, her hair undone. She moved like someone trying very hard to look broken. When she saw me, she gave a tight, trembling smile that didn't touch her eyes. She sat without waiting for an invitation. She started talking before I said a word. It told me Nolan hadn't returned her calls. There is that she couldn't walk into church without people looking away. That women she'd hosted for years now avoided her. That she never meant for things to get this ugly. That it was all just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. I let her talk for 10 minutes straight. I didn't blink. I didn't nod. I didn't speak. I watched her fumble through her version of reality, bending every corner of the truth to avoid the one thing she still hadn't done: own it. Then I reached into my bag and placed a small folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots of the group chats, quotes from board members, the wedding footage where she rolled her eyes and laughed, her own letters. I didn't hand them to her. I slid them gently across the table and waited. She opened it slowly. At first she skimmed, then read closer. Her eyes darted from line to line. Her hand shook. And then the tears came. Not the loud, forced sobs she was known for. Real tears. Silent, ugly, stunned. I waited until she looked up. This isn't what I did to you, I told her. It's what you did to yourself. I just stopped hiding it for you. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Her shoulders slumped slightly, eyes scanning the evidence. For the first time, she looked unsure, not defeated, but finally shaken by something she couldn't twist. Then I gave her an offer. You want peace? I said. Here's your chance. A written apology, sent to every board, group, and family member you lied to. Admit it all. No excuses. No explanations. And then I'll consider telling people to stop pushing for more. When she didn't respond, I added one last thing. This conversation is being recorded for legal protection. If you're thinking about twisting it later, don't bother. She didn't flinch. Just looked down again. The power she had walked in with, what was left of it, was gone. 3 days later, the apology came. It was weak. Barely 4 sentences. She used phrases like misunderstood intentions and things said in a moment of frustration, but she still admitted the messages were real. She named the group chat. She confirmed the letters. She admitted to distorting the truth about certain individuals out of personal bias. It was just enough. Within a week, she was formally removed from every remaining board. Her last 2 allies on the charity circuit cut ties. The church announced a new chairwoman, and Diane's name was missing from the monthly newsletter for the first time in 12 years. Her photo was taken off the website and replaced with a generic flower image. She became a story women whispered about at events. A warning. A name you said quietly when explaining why you do background checks on new board members. Nolan moved out of the house 2 weeks later. He said he needed to figure himself out. He took a studio apartment in the next town over and left quietly, without drama. We didn't fight. We didn't make promises. I let him go with no words left between us. I stayed. I opened a second floral boutique called Thorns First. A nod to every woman who learned the hard way that sometimes you have to protect yourself before you bloom. I used one back room to host monthly support circles. Women came, quietly at first, then regularly. Some cried, some laughed, some just sat and listened. When people ask me how I survived Diane, I don't give long answers. I don't rehash it. I just smile and say, I didn't survive her. I outgrew her.